So immigration law is really complicated and it's always changing. And a common misconception about immigration in the United States is that there's always an opportunity for anyone that wants to immigrate legally. That's not really true. There's 3 major ways that someone can immigrate to the United States. The immigrant must be 1, an immediate family member of a United States citizen or lawful permanent resident. 2, a highly skilled professional that is hard to find in the United States and is requested by a U.S. company. Sorry, no one can hear me. Do you want me to start over? Or, okay. So the immigrant must be 1, an immediate family member of a United States citizen or lawful permanent resident. 2, a highly skilled professional that is hard to find and is requested by a United States company. Or 3, a political or humanitarian refugee that is in danger in his or her home country. So hopeful immigrants must fall into one of these 3 categories, with a few, but sort of hard to come by exceptions, in order to have an opportunity to stand in the figurative line for immigration. So if an immigrant is actually able to get in line, they are subject to a visa cap that's set at 7% of the total wait list per country per year. So for fiscal year 2020, there will be approximately 26,740 visas allowed per country. This is a change from the previous and arbitrary 25,000 visas allowed per country per year. And some low-sending countries will likely never reach their visa limit. There's just not a huge desire for people from all countries to immigrate. But other higher sending countries meet their visa limit every year and basically have a lifetime long wait period in some situations. So one category, which is called F3, is the category for married sons and daughters of United States citizens. And for those F3 category members coming from Mexico, they're having applications processed from August of 1996. So that's like 24 years that these people have been waiting in line and hoping to have a legal way to immigrate. And that's 24 years that these people have not been able to live in the same country as their citizen parents. Mexico is the highest sending country, which makes sense just like geographically. And so almost a year ago, there were 1,206,562 applicants in line from Mexico. The total worldwide number of applicants in line at that time was 3,620,240. That puts applicants from Mexico at almost a third of the total worldwide applicants waiting in the line. But there are 10 countries with over 62,000 applicants in line. So for DACA specifically, I don't even know any of my family members in Mexico. My Spanish isn't like Mexican Spanish. They speak so fast. I wouldn't be able to communicate in my own country. I'm afraid of going back to my country. I don't even know anything about my country except for how to spell it and where it is on the map. These are all statements that I have heard from DACA recipients. I'll regularly hear how thankful they are for the opportunity to live in the United States without fear of deportation and to work here. And they'll tell me how they feel like Americans in every single way, except that they don't have legal status. DACA recipients will mention how much the DACA program has impacted their lives and improved their lives and the lives of their family members. And I've heard how their parents cried with gratitude when the program was announced. But I've also heard how scary it is to send in information about themselves and their family members to the US government. And they feel like they could be putting themselves or their parents or their siblings at risk by calling out where they live and announcing to the government that they're undocumented. DACA stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and it means that the applicants that are eligible and approved for DACA are placed on a deferred action list. They are considered low priority for immigration enforcement or deportation. They will not be placed in removal proceedings or removed from the United States for a specified period of time unless the deferred action status is terminated. These recipients are heavily vetted repeatedly. The history of how DACA came to be. The DREAM Act, which is Development, Relief, and Education for Alien Minors, Act was first introduced in the United States Senate in 2001. The legislative proposal for the DREAM Act was very similar to the way that DACA has played out. Dreamers, if they entered the United States as minors, would be able to receive a conditional and temporary residency and then have the right to work. If they later satisfied further requirements, they would be able to become permanent residents of the United States, and attaining status as a lawful permanent resident would then have eventually allowed them to become United States citizens. The DREAM Act did not pass in 2001, and it has been reintroduced several times in both the House and the Senate, but it has never been approved by majorities in both parts of Congress. So as part of his first presidential campaign, President Obama promised to enact immigration reform. For a variety of reasons, it didn't happen, but Congress continued throughout his first term to increase funding for immigration enforcement. So then, after over 10 years of failed attempts at passing the DREAM Act, DACA was announced by the Department of Homeland Security, or DHS. The announcement, which was through a DHS enforcement memorandum, revealed priorities for enforcement actions. The memorandum announced DHS's decision not to pursue removal against certain individuals. In function, the DACA program was like the DREAM Act, but it did not allow for eventual lawful permanent residency or citizenship. There are a few challenges to the DREAM Act, but they all failed. So who was originally eligible? When DACA was announced, some individuals that were brought to the United States as children could apply for this immigration benefit. These individuals had to have been under the age of 31 as of June 15, 2012, come to the United States before reaching their 16th birthday, have been continuously residing in the United States since June 15, 2007 up to the present time, been physically present in the United States on June 15, 2012, and also at the time of making their request for DACA, had no lawful status on June 15, 2012, been currently in school, having graduated or obtained a certificate of completion from high school, have obtained a GED certificate, or have been an honorably discharged veteran of the Coast Guard or U.S. Armed Forces. They also could not have been convicted of a felony, significant misdemeanor, or 3 or more misdemeanors, other misdemeanors, and then they cannot have posed a threat to national security or public safety. So an individual requesting DACA must have been 15 at the time that or older, at the time that they were requesting DACA, unless he or she was in removal proceedings at the time of the request or have previously had a final removal order or voluntary departure order issued against them. So there are a few things to note. First, having no lawful status as of June 15, 2012 means that an individual may have entered without inspection or previously had lawful immigration status that was expired as of that date. They had to be both over 15 at the time of application and under 31 on June 15th, 2012. And then United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, also called USCIS, is the government entity that processes immigration applications for immigration to the United States. USCIS does not consider how close someone was to meeting these requirements. The requirements are hard lines and there is no wiggle room. Significant misdemeanor means that it's a misdemeanor defined by federal law. So specifically, it's a misdemeanor where the maximum term of imprisonment authorized is 1 year or less, but is greater than 5 days. And regardless of the sentence imposed, there are certain offenses that are always considered significant misdemeanors. Those are domestic violence, sexual abuse or exploitation, burglary, unlawful possession or use of a firearm, drug distribution or trafficking, or driving under the influence. Significant misdemeanor also includes a misdemeanor that's defined by federal law in which the individual was sentenced to time in custody of more than 90 days. So they had to have actually served the 90 days, and it doesn't include sentences that were suspended. Non-significant misdemeanors are crimes with maximum terms of imprisonment of 1 year or less, but greater than 5 days, but are not an offense previously listed as a significant misdemeanor crime, and is a crime for which the individual was sentenced to time in custody of 90 days or less. Minor traffic offenses were not considered misdemeanors for the purposes of DACA. However, driving under the influence is a significant misdemeanor regardless of the sentence. So the Daca process. After the announcement of the Daca program in June 2012, the government began accepting applications in August 2012. Daca applicants would submit lengthy applications, including proof of satisfying all of the requirements. Applicants had to show continuous presence since that date of June 15, 2007. So they would include something from nearly every month of that time period, just to show that they were actually here for the full time. So once an application was submitted, applicants would receive a receipt notice, which just informed them that their application had been received and accepted by USCIS. After some time, applicants received a biometrics appointment notice, where USCIS would assign a date and a time for applicants to go to a relatively local ASC or application support center. Applicants from Salina go to the application support center in Wichita. At the ASC, they'll have their photograph taken, they'll have their fingerprints taken so they can be subjected to a background check, and they'll sign to reaffirm all of the information in their application. This was very nerve-wracking for undocumented people. They were willingly going to immigration offices in hopes that their application would be approved. Then more time would pass and applicants would receive either an approval or a denial notice. Approval notices were shortly followed by an EAD, which is an employment authorization document, also called a work permit or work card. The process, with the decreased amount of evidence required for a renewal request, would repeat every 2 years. So there are a lot of benefits of Daca. To date, nearly 800,000 people have received Daca, and due to that receipt have been able to live and work and pay taxes lawfully in the United States. They also are able to not be fearful that they're going to be deported. Daca recipients are given a work permit and a social security number only for work authorization and tax purposes. Without legal work authorization, immigrants face mistreatment in the workplace and often have difficulty finding employment at all. So during the period of time that someone has Daca, they are not accruing unlawful presence, and it helps them to not trigger a bar when they leave the country. Unlawful presence begins accruing at the time an undocumented person turns 18 and will accrue throughout their lifetime until something stops it. Usually, it's gaining lawful status or leaving the United States. Leaving the United States, though, even for an immigration interview abroad, can trigger a bar. An immigration interview abroad would typically be for someone that was eligible for a different type of immigration relief. Here, triggering a bar means that depending on the amount of unlawful presence that had been accrued during that person's lifetime, he or she may be barred from re-entering the United States for 3 to 10 years. However, if someone had accrued more than 1 year of unlawful presence in 1 or more stays in the United States and then re-entered or tried to re-enter the United States, he or she would trigger a permanent bar and then be ineligible for re-entry. International travel on or after June 15, 2007, but before August 15, 2012, could affect continuous residence and make someone potentially ineligible for Daca. So if there was travel during that time period, the applicant would have to show that it was brief, casual, and innocent. And if travel was for an extended period of time because of an order of exclusion, deportation, or removal, or to participate in criminal activity, that definitely would affect continuous presence and they would be therefore ineligible for Daca. So international travel after August 15, 2012, either before or after the applicant requested Daca but had not yet been approved, would also affect continuous presence and make the applicant ineligible for Daca. International travel on or after August 15, 2012, and after receiving Daca may or may not affect continuous presence. That impact depends on whether the Daca recipient had received advanced parole. Advanced parole allows an alien, which is the actual term used in immigration law, to physically enter the United States for a specific purpose. So someone who has been paroled into the United States has not been admitted, and they remain an applicant for admission even while paroled. There were a multitude of qualifications for receiving advanced parole, including why someone would be eligible. When Daca began, advanced parole was available for humanitarian reasons, to further the purpose of school or work, or for significant public benefit. So a common scenario when DACA recipients would seek advanced parole is if they had a really ill family member in another country that they wanted to visit before they thought that they would pass. So another example is if their school or work was requesting that they travel abroad to complete training. There is, in a normal year, an immigration law training event that includes a quick trip across the border to see the consulate in Ciudad Juarez and learn about the process for U.S. immigration there. DACA recipients who were providing immigration law services would request parole to attend that part of the training so that they could better serve their clients. DHS may issue an advanced parole document as a matter of discretion. It would allow the alien to appear at a port of entry to seek parole into the United States. It could be accepted by a transportation company like an airline or whatever, instead of a visa as authorization for that holder to travel to the United States. It could not, however, be used in place of the required passport, and it did not entitle the holder to actually be paroled into the United States. Being paroled was a separate discretionary decision made at the port of entry upon return from travel abroad. Further, DHS had authorization to revoke or terminate advanced parole documents at any time. Any time includes the time when someone was already outside of the country. If that were to happen, that person, that even though they had the advanced parole document, may be unable to return to the United States without a valid visa or some other kind of document which permitted them to travel to the United States and seek admission. Either of those options are highly unlikely for someone that has DACA. Advanced parole was a desirable benefit for DACA recipients because if they had another pathway to lawful permanent resident status, they would be able to use that entry to make them potentially eligible for an adjustment of status to lawful permanent resident rather than having to leave the United States and risk triggering a bar. There have been a lot of changes to the DACA program, starting with in 2014, the Obama administration decided to expand DACA. The age cap was lifted and the time for between renewals was lengthened. There was a new program called DAPA that was added. DAPA stands for Deferred Action for Parents of Americans. DAPA was like DACA, but for certain parents of United States citizens and lawful permanent residents. It did not apply to the parents of DACA recipients. Some states sued to stop that expansion and the DAPA program, and that suit resulted in the expansion being stopped and the DAPA program never went into play. In 2017, the Trump administration announced that the DACA program would be wound down. They gave one reason, which was that they believed the program was illegal. As a result of that announcement, lawsuits were filed around the country. The 2017 litigation to protect DACA was successful, and in 2018, district courts around the country were enjoining the decision to keep DACA in place. In response to the Trump administration announcements, rescission of the DACA program, President Obama released this quote as a portion of his statement regarding his feelings. This is about young people who grew up in America, kids who study in our schools, young adults who are starting careers, and patriots who pledge allegiance to our flag. These dreamers are Americans in their hearts, in their minds, and in every single way but one, on paper. They were brought to this country by their parents, sometimes even as infants. They may not know a country besides ours. They may not even know a language besides English. They often have no idea that they're undocumented until they apply for a job or college or a driver's license. As a result of the Trump administration's announcement, new DACA applications were stopped and advanced parole was no longer issued for DACA recipients after September 5th, 2017. Only people who had previously been issued DACA could reapply for DACA. New applications were not accepted. In June 2020, the United States Supreme Court agreed with those challenging the rescission of DACA that the administration had violated the law in attempting to rescind DACA the way that it did. This decision was interesting because it was like kind of a surprise 5-4 decision where a typically more conservative Chief Justice John Roberts joined the 4 more liberal justices and actually authored the opinion. But unfortunately, the reasoning was less than ideal for DACA proponents and had failed to offer sufficient evidence for racial discrimination, so then they could not proceed with their legal challenges on equal protection grounds. This is interesting considering the derogatory comments made by the Trump administration about Mexicans and Latinos, and the fact that the rescission would disproportionately impact the Mexican and Central American population. The Supreme Court found that the administration had not followed the proper procedures required under the Administrative Procedures Act in rescinding the program, and the Department of Homeland Security was arbitrary and capricious in its rescission of the DACA program. The rescission, based on the reasoning that the program was illegal, failed to weigh the interests of the many people that relied on the continuation of this program. Not only do DACA recipients rely on the continuation of this program, but others like employers, communities, U.S. citizen children of DACA recipients also rely on the continuation. The decision has further been called a roadmap for the Trump administration to follow to rescind DACA should President Trump be reelected, and it basically laid out what the proper procedure would have been. As a result of the Supreme Court's decision, it seemed like USCIS should go back to processing applications the way that it did before the rescission even happened at all. The decision made it clear that changes to the DACA program were necessary, considerations for changes were necessary, but no such considerations were made. It seemed like the DACA program would just go back to the original operating capacity, I guess. However, this is not what happened. The acting heads of both USCIS and DHS issued statements that questioned the legality of the Supreme Court's decision. This is ironic because it's basically the Supreme Court's job to determine what is legal. So then USCIS announced that they would not be accepting new applications anyway, and the time for renewal would be reduced from the previous 2 years to 1 year. So the consensus is that this has made DACA an almost constant cycle of renewal and uncertainty for recipients. Since the Supreme Court case, USCIS is now, though, granting some advanced parole applications for urgent humanitarian or significant public benefit reasons. There is unfortunately a lot of uncertainty that remains for the future of the DACA program and DACA recipients. There are a lot of people that are left out of DACA and are therefore now accruing unlawful presence. The age cap that was originally placed on DACA meant that there were a lot of people who had struggled and fought and hoped for legal immigration reform that were just left out of the program from the beginning. The requirements for the period in which people who had been out of status left out people who came in with a visitor visa, but that visa expired sometime after June 15, 2012. And then after the rescission, there were a group of kids that should have essentially aged in and definitionally meet all of the requirements for DACA, but are left out because USCIS is not taking any applications now. This leads to very different outcomes for people who were similarly situated, but differ in whether they qualified for DACA at a time when it was available. There are a lot of myths and misconceptions about the DACA program and arguments against it. One is that DACA recipients are criminals. There is actually no evidence showing that DACA recipients commit crimes at higher rates than native-born U.S. citizens. And most research shows that immigrants are less likely to commit crimes than native-born citizens. The recipients of DACA are low-priority individuals that have exhibited good behavior and have subjected themselves to criminal background checks. Another myth is that DACA negatively impacts the U.S. economy or takes jobs away from the United States citizens. And economists have rejected that claim that DACA hurts the economy or the labor market. So I know I have provided you with a lot of information, and I'd like to leave you with a few key points. Immigration, including DACA, is complex and slow and tedious and scary, and the right way is not quick, and it's not even always an available option. So many members of our community and our country have received DACA and are hardworking, strong, and upstanding members of our society. And then I think we're going to have a DACA recipient that will speak. Do you want me to stay with you or go away?
Okay, so like I said, I've never went back to Mexico. I am proud of where I'm from, but this is home to me. I don't know any different. I really didn't know that I could not go to college like anybody else until I was in high school. I had good grades. I wanted to leave home and go to school like anybody else. But then I found out I couldn't because I didn't have a social. And it was really hard for me because I wanted to do that so bad. And I wanted to get a driver license, but I couldn't. So I think I've still done good. It just takes me a little bit longer than some people sometimes, because if we go to school and I do have some college, we can't get grants or anything like that. So the schooling that I have done, it's just been different. I've had to find ways to pay out of my pocket and stuff like that, or some scholarships. And so when I finished high school, when I heard about DACA in 2012, I ran to Catholic Charities and I got all my paperwork, all my school stuff. I had it all. I mean, I've been here all my life. And I went to Catholic Charities and I was scared, but I really wanted to try. So I sent in my application and I got granted in, I think, November of 2012. And when I found out about this, everybody that I knew that was in my position, I told them, come here, let's do this. So I volunteered and I got paperwork for people together so they could do the same thing that I did. So when I got when I was able to work, I went to work at Salina South High School as the attendance lady. And I was still working at McDonald's and loved working at McDonald's, by the way. You can make an impact anywhere that you work, really. So then I worked at Salina South High School, and then in 2015, I started working at the Salina Police Department. I've been there almost 6 years, and now I'm a dispatch supervisor. And, I just applied, and I took the test like anybody else, and they hired me. They picked me, and I've grown so much professionally and in a lot of their ways there. And I also taught a couple classes for Salina Tech, Intro to Communications and Intro to Criminal Justice last year. And I worked at the Martin Youth Center, where it's part of Central Kansas Mental Health Center, and we help kids. That's what we do there. So I do that part-time. And I like to stay busy. And recently, I just got hired on Catholic Charities as an accredited immigration representative. So I'm really excited, and I just want to help. At the end of the day, that's all I want to do. I want to serve, and this is home. And I understand, maybe I didn't come here legally, but I didn't have a choice. I was 3 years old. And like I said, I will never forget where I came from, because maybe it has shaped me. But I know there is a lot of people like me that really just want to do good. They just want to work, and they want to have a family, and they want to be here. Maybe one day I will get to visit Mexico, and I hope so, but it will be strange for me because I don't remember what it's like, And like I said, I just want to be given an opportunity, and whatever I can do to help, that's what I'm going to do. So it's a little bit about me. That's all I got. There you go. Thanks.
Yeah.
So one of the things that Fidencio mentioned in one of his conversations was that it really had to become a conversation that he had with his family, because there was a lot of fear early on. And I guess I'm curious if you had that same experience as far as your whole family. How did everybody feel good about the process? Was people nervous? Scared. Very scared. And uncertainty, because it was new. And we didn't
At the beginning, you said there's like 26,000.
Visas available.
Yeah, and that's more than there was before.
Yeah, like less than 2,000 more. And 25,000 was the previous number that was set like just completely arbitrarily, like many years ago. I don't know when it was set. And since then, they've updated within the last 7 years, but I don't know when, to be 7% of the overall number of people in line can come from each country, which ends up being about 26,000. I think it's like 740 or something like that, visas available per country.
What is it that you do? Where do you fit in this?
I'm the immigration lawyer, so I help immigrants through whatever kind of process they have. So for DACA, I would help them like originally gather all of their documentation, fill out the application. Applications can be really lengthy and confusing, and you have to submit more evidence than you would think you would have to submit to prove everything. So I will help them through that process, send it in, and then just guide them through the rest of the process. We do other kinds of immigration services, but that's how it goes for DACA.
And the percentage of those that actually make it through the application process and actually then are okay. What's your...
That are approved for DACA. We screen people pretty hard before we would send in their applications, just because, especially for DACA, it can be very dangerous if they weren't actually eligible, or at least that was our feeling on it. So most of our applicants were approved. Do you know, like almost all of them?
Yeah, but they have their fingerprints, so if they had a criminal record, they wouldn't qualify for it anyway. So we, yeah, try to screen them very much before applying.
So we ask a lot of questions to make sure that people are qualified for the program before we sent that in. And now a lot of our people, or all really, are renewals because there are no new applications. So we make sure that they know that they cannot be committing criminal acts and stuff like that. And then we screen them again when they come back in and make sure they haven't left the country or committed any crimes or been arrested or anything like that before we'll send in their application again. Yes?
Know that they need to go through a lawyer to do that?
Do you know the answer to that question?
I'm sorry,
Going through the lawyer, is that a normal part that the applicants would know is the best way to do it?
I think most applicants or potential applicants know that they would need to go to an immigration attorney just because they know the law. And yeah, most applicants would know to go to an immigration attorney before submitting anything to the Department of Homeland Security.
We have seen people that will file it on their own, which they are allowed to do. It's just that it takes a lot to figure it out. So it may be easier for me or Yessie to do it for them. Did you have a question?
How many people did you said, but I didn't quite catch, how many people are currently DACA recipients?
800,000-ish were approved and received DACA. Mm-hmm.
How many in our community do we know?
I don't know.
I know that could be an ever-changing thing.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know the answer. Also, people think that DACA is only for people from Mexico or only people for Mexico and Central America or maybe South America, but there are people from like Ireland that are on DACA, or various other countries that just came here and stayed here and then got DACA so that they would be not at risk of deportation.
So is there a bias, do you feel, in the process
You mean in just immigration in general, like the line?
Well, it's use DACA for it, and
Okay.
with DACA,
With DACA, I think it was just if you meet the requirements and you are a good person and we can show that you have not committed a felony or a significant misdemeanor or had 3 or more other misdemeanors, I think you pretty much were approved regardless of what country you're from.
Is there usually a hesitation for people to go to lawyers because of the expense?
I think that plays into it for sure. And there have been people that will tell them what our fees are, not even necessarily for DACA, but for other services, and they'll just decide to do it on their own. Being a social services agency, our fees are lower than like a, I don't know, firm lawyer, but it can still be a deterrent. And then on top of our fees, there's the fees for USCIS, which are going up soon and were already pretty expensive in some cases.
Do you pay fees each time you renew? So when they shorten that renewal cycle, you're actually paying
Paying,
more and more.
yes. Every year instead of every 2 years.
I have a question on the difference between naturalization and going through the DACA program.
Uh-huh.
My sister was born in Korea, my parents naturalized her, and that was an adoption situation. But I'm just kind of, trying to understand what that difference is.
Okay, so for naturalization, she's now a citizen if she went through that whole process. With DACA, there's just like a list, I guess, where the people on DACA are placed on deferred action, which means that they're likely not to be deported just because they were found by a policeman or an ICE agent or something like that. There are some differences if there was like a major crime or something involved, but just like being stopped for, I don't know, speeding or something, someone with no status could be deported, whereas a US citizen would never be deported unless there were like, I don't know, they found that it was all based on fraud or something. A DACA recipient could have previously, before DACA, been deported for speeding, but because of DACA, they're considered low priority and generally will not be in danger for things like that. Yes?
So, if there's 800,000 people in DACA, according to my arithmetic, that's like less than 1/3 of 1% of the United States. So does it ever strike you as this whole thing is just like, who cares? I mean, if that's a smaller percentage, what difference does it make? I guess I don't see why the whole program is such a big deal. I'm just giving them their papers and get on.
That's how I feel about it, but there are some other people that don't feel that way. There's a larger population of undocumented people than that, but they haven't received DACA or even been eligible for DACA. I think there's maybe like 11 million undocumented people in the United States. But for DACA, I think it's pretty clear just the fact that they were brought here, like Yessie when she was 3. It's not like she can really be like, no, I don't think this is a good idea, So, yeah, so I think that there should be more for them. And I think that's the goal of the DREAM Act, but it just has never fully materialized.
Are there other questions?
All right, well, I want to thank you both for spending time with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I encourage you all to spend some time with bird watchers. If you did not catch our interviews with Cadencio when he was here in Salina personally, we do still have them on video. You can get them on YouTube or on our website. You can even just watch them in the gallery. you want to. We also still have a few limited edition gallery guides that contain the full essay by Ruslana Lichter. And it is just a beautiful and a little bit chilling commentary on the immigrant experience in the United States, particularly in Fidencio's situation. So I encourage you to take a look at that, possibly purchase one if you want. Purchase of these types of things are what helps us do programs like this or bring residents like Fidencio to Salina, so every $10 helps. The last piece of our puzzle of having bird watchers here in Salina will happen September the 29th. We will have the Poet Laureate here, and he will be closing out the Bird Watchers exhibition. That will be a free event, and we encourage you all to come down and enjoy that. But please bring your friends. Come spend time with bird watchers because it really is very profound when you see his documents, which was his version of starting to save and collect all the mail with his address on it and all of the things that he had to do in that process and sort of where his mind was at in 2016 when he thought he faced this reality that he could be deported to a country he did not know. So please spend time with bird watchers, but thank you for coming out today. We appreciate it, and thank you guys.
Thank you.